Very pleased to be here. My name is Jonathan Hunsley, and today I'll be talking about the subject business analysis. What is it and why is it important, or its importance for short? So I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Fingers crossed this will all work swimmingly. Fingers crossed you can see the screen now. Could I have a thumbs up, Christopher? You can see that. Excellent. Thank you. Right. So today we'll be talking about why is business analysis important. We're also going to be looking at the origins of the business analysis role, and I'm going to share a selection of a few individual techniques that might be of interest for you. So a quick introduction to myself. So I work as the Service Development Director for Assist Knowledge Development. This basically means that I get to spend my time researching new and emerging theories in the field of business analysis and business service design, really focused on making change improve in terms of the outcomes that we deliver for our respective customers. In terms of my background, I've been involved as an absolute privilege to contribute to a number of different textbooks, so Business Analysis 4th edition and Business Analysis Techniques that you can see on your screens. I'm also the organizer behind the scenes of the BA Brew podcast, and I'm sometimes the host and a guest as well on that podcast. So please do check out that podcast if it is of interest for you in terms of keeping your BA skills and change skills up to date. So today's content, we're going to look at the origins and evolution of the business analysis role. We're going to look at the services and the value offer of the BA professional, and I'm going to show you a selection of some of my favorite BA tools and techniques. So hopefully they'll be of interest for you. So let's have a look at the origins of the business analysis role. And there's different views on where did business analysis start and where did it come from. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I think there are three main strains from which we can look at where did the BA role originate. And the first strain of where I think it originates is from scientific management school of thought, sometimes described as being Taylorism, after Frederick Taylor, the theorist. So this was really looking at kind of time and motion studies. How can we make businesses more effective, more efficient, looking at improvement of processes. So I think that kind of drive for efficiency that we can see in the scientific management school of thought and Taylorism is one of the origins of this role that we call business analysis. The other key origin is the lean school of thought. So people like Deming, revolutionizing Japanese industry post-World War II, really looking at optimizing flow and quality, enhancing the customer experience, really looking at the voice of the customer. I can see a strain in terms of that being part of the evolution story of business analysis. And then in the 1950s, early 1960s, we start to see the advent of more and more technology. And I'd argue that the information technology revolution has been also a key part of the origin of the business analysis role. And it's really been looking at, how do we optimize the use of information technology for business goals and purposes. So sort of three strains that have led into what we'll describe as the business analysis role that we have today. Some of you may have come across the analogy of the business analyst being a bridge, and this is also part of our history as a professional discipline. So we've got business stakeholders with business needs, and the original kind of thoughts on business analysis were that the business analyst would act as a translator of those business needs to IT specialists. So when I started in certainly my BA career, there were lots of IT specialists that weren't particularly allowed to go and speak with business folk. And so the BA was sort of a translator between the technical IT specialists and the business folk, and there'll be a bridge was the analogy. This doesn't hold weight today, and has very much moved on, and I'll explain why in a moment. So today we'd still think of the BA as a bridge, and we'd still have business needs coming in, but the business analyst is much more involved now in investigation and analysis of business problems, business opportunities, and translating those into holistic solutions that work. And what I'm introducing to you to now is the Poppet model. So the Poppet model is a tool that you can use to investigate the business situation, and it covers people, the organization, the process, the information, and the technology aspects. And it's much more holistic than simply thinking that every business problem requires an IT solution. We need to think more holistically around the business system. What is the best possible way that we can meet the business need, the business opportunity that has come to us? So let's now move on to the services and the value proposition of the BA role. And what I thought I'd do is start with this. Now this is some research that was done. A number of different academics have looked at what are the costs of making an error relative to requirements on the overall software change delivery lifecycle. So you can see that the academics that are cited in this study agree that the cost of fixing an error, if it's found at the requirements phase, is £1. So the cost to rewrite a user story, for example, or a process model or a use case diagram, the cost is equated to £1. If that same error is found in the design phase, the average of these various academics' research into this is that it's 8 times the cost of fixing the error than if it was found at requirements. If we're in an IT development, the coding, the cost of fixing the error in coding is 20 times the cost of the requirements cost. And then if we're in testing, up to 278 times the cost of fixing the very same error. Some of these academics actually quote much higher numbers, up to 400 times the cost of fixing an error. So one of the kind of value propositions of the business analyst is to prevent errors within the software or change delivery lifecycle that are needless. And I'll show you later on the requirements engineering and management framework, which allows us to help to pick up on some of these errors and prevent them downstream. The other interesting thing that I thought I'd share with you, some estimates say that 70% of the costs of an IT change or a solution are incurred after deployment. So there's lots of hidden costs around requirements errors that you can't see on this particular graph that I'm showing you here, because if we've got changes that are deployed into the business, there might be errors associated with those changes, and they therefore impact the business on a much more longer term basis. All right, let's have a look at some principles for business analysis then. So we should be looking at root causes and not symptoms. So this means that we won't diagnose incorrectly. We're going to look at what's the cause and effect relationship between problems and opportunities and the business systems that we're looking at. There's no point treating a symptom if the root causes haven't been identified for a problem. Let's imagine we've got a process that's working in an operational environment, and the people that are administering that process don't understand it, or it's too convoluted. So we'd look at, well, is that process fit for purpose? Are the individuals that are trying to administer that process appropriately trained? And try and work on those root causes as opposed to a symptom of, say, a call backlog or some other issue. We'd look at business improvement, not just IT change. So it is holistic in nature, and IT is one option for improving the business, not the only option. We'll be looking for strategic alignment as opposed to tactical solutions. One of the things that a business analyst will do is act as a critical friend to the business to drive strategic and beneficial outcomes for the business. And so where possible, we'll be looking to question and challenge and to help the business improve long term. And the other thing, that just to mention this word holistic again, it is very much a holistic approach and not siloed. So the business analyst will challenge and critique organizational silos and seek to improve the processes across those where they are in existence. Right, they're the business analysis principles that I thought I'd show you. Let's just move quickly on. This is the business analysis service framework. And what this does is this goes way beyond that bridge analogy that I was talking to you about earlier. What it does is it describes the services that the business analyst professional offers. And this is the output of academic research that Deborah Paul conducted several years ago, where she interviewed business analysis leaders and practitioners with hundreds and hundreds of years of collective experience, and distilled that research into this output that you can see on the screen today. So this is the business analysis service framework, and what you can see are 6 discrete services and the value proposal for each of the individual services. So you can see that business analysis will offer the service of situation investigation and problem analysis, and that the value proposition of that service is that you get investigated, analysed and stated business problems. So a clear defined scope from which to work from is the intent. Some business analysts will also get involved in feasibility assessment and business case development, where the goal is to develop a relevant, rigorous financial case for a business change. Business process improvement is also a key service offer, as is requirements definition. Some business analyst practices and teams offer business acceptance testing in support of their testing colleagues. Some don't offer that service, but it is a service that is offered by some BAs. And then business change deployment, looking at change readiness, looking at training and making sure that when the changes are delivered, that it's a foundation from which to realize benefits and to hopefully co-create value with the recipients of those changes. That's the business analysis service framework. There is a further service that is stakeholder engagement, and that stakeholder engagement service is applied during the delivery of each of these individual services. Right, I also wanted to show you a selection of key tools and techniques, and this has been quite difficult to choose actually, so I've chosen 4 techniques for you, and the first that I thought I'd show you would be this. This is the business change life cycle. What it is it's a generic life cycle that helps an individual think about any business change and where that sits relative to the business case and strategic alignment. So if we start with the alignment phase, in the alignment phase, we'd be looking at, does the proposal for a change make sense relative to the business environment in which the organization is operating? Will the change be against regulator concerns or desires of customers, for example? Would be something that you'd look at there. There are various tools, things like PESTLE analysis, political, economic, social, cultural, technological, legal and environmental concerns. We'd also be looking at the competitive environment. What are competitors up to? Does the change make sense given that context? We'd also look at the business strategy. So what is the organization's plan for success, and does the proposal for change align with that plan, or is it slightly ajar to that plan? And then the enterprise architecture, which is the combination of the business, the applications, the data and the infrastructure architecture. Does the proposal for change make sense given the organization's enterprise architecture? So for example, if the organization predominantly uses Windows, laptops and operating systems, and there's a proposal to buy a particular team a set of iMacs, does that proposal make sense? Are the iMacs going to be supported in that environment, or should they in fact be questioning or challenging whether or not their enterprise architecture strategy is valid? So the alignment phase is a really key phase. From that phase, you would develop a draft business case. So this would be a draft view of the costs, the benefits, the impacts and the risks of each of the available options. And one of the options that would always be considered would be the do nothing option. It's a viable option and it is needed in order to baseline all of the comparisons for other options. You then work through the definition phase, and as an output of the definition phase, we'd expect a more robust, more complete business case. So it's updated in the definition phase. We'll be doing lots of work in terms of requirements engineering. What are the more detailed wants and needs of the business, and really kind of getting a much firmer grip on the scope of the change. Then we work through design and development. So in this phase, we'll be updating the business case, updating our view of the costs, the benefits, the risks, the impacts, and whatnot. And that's based on the foundation of the needs that are defined in the definition phase. We then move through to implementation, and this is where the change delivery happens. So it moves from the concept of a solution through to the delivered solution, so it starts to be used. We again update the business case, and the basis of the business case is for a basis from which to realize business benefits. And that's the final phase of the business change lifecycle. That realization of the benefits, that's a review of which benefits were achieved, which ones were not achieved, gives us a basis from which to select future projects. And you can see this final arrow from realization through to alignment. And the intent is that we have an objective approach to investment decision making so that we can select projects that are going to work for our respective businesses. That's the business change lifecycle. That's the first of the models that I wanted to show you. The second model that I wanted to show you is this. It's the VMOST analysis. So vision stands for, the V stands for vision, and the vision is the target state for the organization. So where does the organization want to be? So we'd be using a tool like VMOST in the alignment phase of the business change lifecycle. So we'd be saying, right, does the change that we're working on align to the organization's vision of where it wants to be? The mission is, how does the organization achieve its target state? So what is its core thing that it does? And that core thing that it does enables it to meet its target state. The objective is, and you're going to have multiple objectives. These should be SMART, so specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And they amplify the journey that the organization will be on to achieve its mission and achieve its vision. And so we'd have kind of key strategic objectives. Ideally, these would be across the areas of kind of customer, process, finance, and learning and growth. I'm just referring there to the Kaplan and Norton balanced scorecard in that definition of objectives. The strategy is, how will we achieve the objectives that we've set out, and long-term plan for success against the objectives. And then the tactics are more operational and fluid, and these change depending upon the execution and the delivery of the strategy. Really useful technique that helps us to get our heads around what is the organization's business strategy, and one that you can use at lots of different levels. So you can use this on an organizational strategic level. You could apply VMOST to a department or to a division of an organization. You could look at a team's VMOST, or you could even develop a VMOST for yourself as an individual as well. So a multifunctional tool. Right, the next tool that I wanted to show you is quite a simple one. It's called gap analysis. So what this is it's the difference between the current state and the target state, and is, for me, the foundation of all strategy and all change. And what you can see on this particular version of gap analysis is that I've aligned the current and target state to that pop-it model that I mentioned to you earlier. So we can look at the dimensions of people, organization, process, and IT, and ask the question, well, what do they look like in the current state? And then we can use that same model to enable a gap analysis for what those dimensions might look like for the target state. And this tool is one that I've used extensively in my BA career, and is one that I still use today for lots and lots of different reasons. So hopefully that one is of use for you as well. And then the final tool that I wanted to show you, and I promised this earlier when we were looking at requirements errors, and this is the requirements engineering and management framework. And what it does is it gives you the steps from which to evolve and engineer requirements. So the first step is requirements elicitation. And some people incorrectly call this requirements gathering. It's not requirements gathering because we have to tease out tacit knowledge. So the knowledge that people have that they're unable to articulate easily. So what we'll do is we'll do things like prototyping and scenario analysis to tease out the knowledge that people have in their heads that they're unable to verbalize. We'll also use things like workshops and interviews, observation, questionnaires. There's lots of different requirements elicitation techniques that we've got available to us. And this is the first part of the requirements engineering lifecycle. Requirements analysis is all about checking and analyzing the validity of the wants and needs that have been described to us. Are the wants and needs clear and succinct? Are they aligned to the strategy? So we go up to the VMOST and check, is it aligned with the organization's objectives and vision and mission? Are the requirements that we've written down, are they clear? Are they correct? Are they traceable? And importantly, are they testable as well? And what this does, this analysis, it helps to reduce the prevalence of requirements errors. Validation is all about sense checking the requirements with multiple different stakeholders. So we'd be checking the requirements with the project sponsor and asking for feedback. We'd also be getting feedback from people like the designers, the architects, the testers, the end users, and any subject matter experts that were required, people like compliance and legal and others. Requirements documentation, so is a concept, so we'll have a glossary of terms in the requirements document, and we would select various different tools, things like user stories, use cases, test cases may be defined in here, and acceptance criteria. Process and data models would also be included in the requirements documentation phase. And then finally, the requirements management. So requirements management is needed irrespective of the software change delivery lifecycle. We have to have a baseline of what are the requirements that are agreed and an approach for them evolving as change comes in, be it a waterfall type change where we have to rescope the project, or if it's in an agile context, we'll be redefining and repositioning the user stories on a user story backlog. So this is an exceptionally useful tool for business analysts and hopefully of use for you as well today. So that's the 4 tools that I wanted to show you. And that brings us towards a close for our particular discussion subjects that I wanted to present anyway. But I just wanted to say thank you to you all for listening and to check in with you to see if there were any questions. So any questions for any of you that are there? I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and hopefully that will enable me to see you all. Were there any questions at all?